the Vice President of CBSI. What's CBSI?
Cardholder brokerage service. So basically an insurance company that works in the credit card business.
Okay.
It's our 50th anniversary year.
Wow, okay. He's an alumnus of Iona College from way back then when this used to be Hagen School of Business, not LaPenta. And we are very happy and privileged actually to have him in our midst. And he's just going to share his experiences with us and give us some inspirational thoughts. So,
thank you. Appreciate it. Very nice introduction. Yeah, again, Ken Kraetzer. I'm a vice president of CBSI, or up in Harrison, a family-owned firm, which is a career option. I've been there 30 years after working at American Express, Chase Manhattan Bank, and a brokerage company, Dean Witter Reynolds, which was once part of Sears. Also got started. I went to Providence College. They got 2 games into the NCAA tournament this year, but it's grown a lot. And one of the things I did take away from Providence was at the time they had some great people in the athletic department. Dave Gavitt, who was a Hall of Famer, who basically put NCAA basketball together the way it is now with a big TV contract. And he started the Big East Conference. And a fellow named Lou Lamoriello, who was a hockey coach then, 25 years, 3 Stanley Cups with the Devils, and now is running the New York Islanders. And they've been playing a little bit better since he got there. And I got, one of the things I'll mention I did at the time, and maybe it was easier back then, is I was taking a marketing class. And I said, why don't, out of Sports Illustrated, which everybody used to read then, not so much now, but there was an article about Bill Beck, the owner of the Chicago White Sox. And they said he had an open door policy, took calls from fans. So Friday afternoon, I called him up, and I talked to him. Bill Beck was the owner and a guy who was very promotional. He had the first exploding scoreboard, and everything was about customer service and the fans. So I got him on the phone. I talked to him, added it to a term paper, and then how many of you heard of Marvin Miller, the baseball labor leader? I did the same thing with him. I found his, there was an article about him and his law firm, and I called him up and I got him on the phone. So, and Marvin Miller just was added to the Hall of Fame, but he's the guy who basically got the big money contracts in baseball started. Baseball players used to play, Mickey Mantle played for $100,000 to the Yankees, and that's the way it was back then. But Marvin Miller is responsible for the labor strategy that enabled the big contracts that you see today in baseball and then other sports that follow. One of the things I got to say is we didn't have internet. We didn't have laptops. We had some desktop computers back when I was in school. But my favorite movie is Apollo 13. You ever see the movie Apollo 13? What is it? They put a man on the moon with a slide rule, and with computers that were the size of this room that you had to do decks of cards. But they knew their math, and they got it done. They figured out the math to send someone into space and then into the trajectory to get them to the moon. And then in that case, how to get them back when an emergency happened. And it was all done with slide rules, no calculators then. So just it's one of the things you got to know the basics and how the math works. And I remember I was telling a professor that when I was here over a summer course, I had to learn how to do regression analysis. Anyone do a regression analysis? Yeah, not easy. Basically, it was like, how do you pick, if you're going to look at 4 stocks in a portfolio, how do they change as a portfolio? If one goes up, what happens to the other 3? Or 2 go up, what happens to the other 2? That sort of thing. How they work and change together. But you had to do it by hand. And somehow or other I got through it and I passed the course. But that's the thing, you got to know how the math works. We talk about algorithms now, right, on the internet and websites. You got to know how the algorithm works and know the fundamentals of that and data the code when you're responsible for making sure it works. And testing is very important. I got a job. I took a course at Fordham University when I got out of school, and I went to their job board because I was looking for a part-time job, and I got a job with a company in Westchester that was in the mailing list business. A fellow named Herbert Dunhill, And Westchester used to have a cottage industry of mailing list companies, which is now the data business. And so I'm not there a month when I got this job up in Crestwood. And he says, Ken, you're going with us to the National Direct Marketing Association convention in Chicago. And I said, wow, that's great. So I said, here's your tickets. It's out there on Sunday for lunch. So I did that, and the Direct Marketing Association used to be like everything to do with the mail. You know, direct mail, when we used to send out millions of catalogs, credit card offers, and so on. And then it expanded to customer service and other directions. But went down there. But the point that I realized I was onto something was I was at the Hilton, the Hyatt Hotel in Chicago, right on the river, just south of the river in Chicago. It's still a big convention hotel. And I went down the escalator to the trade show. And all of a sudden I saw booths to the left of me, booths to the right and front. And back then they would bring in the litter shop equipment into the trade show and how you sorted mail. And they brought print equipment in. But it was this huge thing. All of a sudden I realized the scope of the industry that I had been introduced to. And it's all because of my friend Herb Dunhill, who I helped me so much. Another time he told me, he said, Ken, next week you're going out to see that prospect in Chicago, just like a United Airlines commercial. And he said, you're going to get, when you're on the way back, go see those prospects in Louisville and Nashville that you've been talking to. So I did. And the trip to Dallas went well. We came up with a new client that was a client for years. And it was just one of those moments that you know, when you get set out into the world and you're on your own. There was this huge rainstorm in Dallas cutting across town. I was going to the east side of town of Dallas, huge rainstorm. But I got there, and we had a great meeting. We put on business that lasted for years. And the other thing that happened then is I got invited, took me to a trade association event in New York City for this group. It was then called the 100 Million Club, and then it became the Direct Marketing Club of New York. And now it's about to change to become the Marketing Club of New York, because we were not sure how direct marketing. We feel like everybody in direct marketing uses in the digital business all the analytics that was used in direct marketing, but it's now applied to digital. So I'm now on the board of that group, you know, and it's really neat. I got started my MBA at Iona. I did the 4 years at night routine, and I'll tell you, I grew more from that. I took a job at American Express on Long Island, and then I was at Dean Witter Reynolds in the World Trade Center, and I'd leave school, you know, work at 5:10, that subway train ride, maybe eat something and get here for a 6:30 class. That was on until 9:30, and did that for about 3 years. And you learn a lot, you know, and just it really was something that helped my career tremendously, provided tremendous focus and technical information. And when I was at American Express, have you got an American Express card? Yeah? You're good. You know, that's a business that really hasn't changed a lot in 40 years. It's basically still the same. You know, with a little more technology, but you learn how a big company operates. And they had a CEO named Jim Robbins at the time, who was considered one of the best CEOs in America. And it was just, how do you serve, you know, what do we have, maybe 15 million customers at the time? And how do you service them? And my job was to do mailings to them. We did 10 mailings a year, and we had to identify which of the 10 million customers to send a mailing of 100,000 people to. So we did a lot of things in targeting and segmentation. And then I moved to a company called Dean Witter, which isn't around by brand anymore. They were bought by Morgan Stanley. But anybody remember the names of Hal Holbrook and Cheryl Teagues? Stand out to anybody? Perhaps I think you might remember this one. But they were the spokespersons for Sears back in the 80s. Now, Sears is what? It's real estate. It's about the only thing it's got. The store in White Plains just closed. But back then, it was the world's largest retailer in the 80s, and they were trying to modernize, and really struggled at it. Sears obviously was the one who started the whole catalog business, and they gave up on it. They knew how to sell things to thousands and thousands of people in farms and urban areas all across the country, you know, for years and years. But they couldn't modernize. And they had a huge overhead from their retirement fund, and they just withered away, unfortunately. And but we're working with them. My job was, at the time, they had 45 million credit card customers. And it was surprising. They turned out to be much more affluent than people did. We're starting to use some of the analytical tools to analyze demographics of a customer base, like serious customers. They turned out to be much more affluent than people thought. And my job was to help stockbrokers at Witter market mutual funds to those 45 million people. So we did all sorts of things. Might be called multi-channel marketing now, but all sorts of different ways to reach out. We used statements, we used direct mail, we did seminars, all sorts of ways. And the thing that really worked for them is that Witter hired 1,500 stockbrokers in a matter of a couple of years. And what they did is they put them in Sears stores to work, because they had little kiosks. They called it the Sears Financial Network. They were next to the Allstate auto insurance booth. And it worked because they did face-to-face marketing. You know, they met people face-to-face. They check out line, they put an insert into the shopping deck. And some of those brokers are still working today, but they got their start through that. Then I had a chance to go to Chase Manhattan Bank, now called JP Morgan. Again, we were marketing to about 5 million credit card customers. How many credit cards do you think Chase has today?
100 million.
Well, maybe. Depends on, if you count debit cards, at least 50 million. And one of the things that happened, and this is operations management, is there were takeovers like crazy in the 90s and the early 2000s, and Chase got bought up by Chemical Bank, which had bought Manufacturers Hanover Bank. Manufacturers Hanover used to sponsor the big PGA golf tournament in Westchester. But the bank had losses from international lending, and so they were in kind of a weak financial position, so Chemical went in as the dominant company. And one of the things that happens is you have to merge credit cards and debit cards and checking accounts into one system. So in that era, there were a lot of people at processing companies and in the banks figuring that out. Usually they would go to whichever was the acquiring bank would adopt those credit cards, which meant you had to transfigure all those accounts and move them into the new accounts to do it seamlessly. And really a challenge for the whole industry, as there were so many mergers going on. And so that's something to think about. Account transfer. That's been a big part of banking. And one thing I would say is, you're mostly what, juniors? Juniors, okay. Is in banking, one of the directions to go if you're interested is going to a processing company. Because what's happened is basically whoever's got the better computer system wins. So, there was a company called First Data that's still out there that was considered the best processing company in the 80s, and they're still out there. But whichever bank or has the best system, or if you're a smaller bank, I'm doing some work with community banks, and they don't have the money and they don't have the expertise to do this. So they go to a processing company and outsource. And so that's the big decision point, is whether you do things internally. It could be any kind of organization, but I followed how it's worked in banking, is how much you do internally and how much you pick to outsource. Some companies may outsource customer service, answering the phone, because they just don't have enough employees to do that function, and they want more flexibility, so they'll outsource this. One time we put on a blackboard, if there were 10 functions you had to do to run a project, get a project off the ground, you just put them on the board. All the different things. You got to send out account applications, you got to take them in, you got to put them on the system, you got to send them a fulfillment kit, you got to do a test, all the different things that you do with them. Send out forms, send out regulatory notices. So we used to figure there were 10 major steps, and we'd go one by one and say, we want to do this in-house, or we want to outsource that step. And this came up again. I was on a webinar with Salesforce. And Salesforce is one of those companies just came out of nowhere. about 10 years ago as a big processing company. And any of you use Salesforce? Are you, did you get a certification or you just use it for?
I like experimented with it. I think it was journeyman.
Okay.
First level. So like
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was talking to a professor here that, that's a good thing to learn. It's kind of one of those tools that can get you a job. If you know how to run, a program like that, it can get you in the door, then you can learn, how, the organization works. But it's sort of like years ago, we all, you could get a job by running Excel for a department. There'd always be, we'd always need an Excel expert to do the finances, do budget. And now you could say the same thing about a program like Salesforce. So I encourage you, get any experience, get a training class, good program to be aware of, and it could get you a job because if you know how to run it, even the basics, you're ahead of 90% of people. But that's something every company, or almost every company is using. There's another one I was talking to a consultant about last week called Hubspot. Anyone use Hubspot or you check it? I would take a look at that and look at the things it could do for a company. How you doing? And I would look at HubSpot too, because companies become partners, some of the digital agencies. And again, if you learn how to run it and the functions that it can do, marketing, managing a website, managing mobile even, that's where companies are going to do a lot of the things they can't do in-house, are these kind of processing companies, and HubSpot and Salesforce are right at the top of the list. One of the things that happened, we were following during the pandemic, the Paycheck Protection Program. Anyone follow that? Well, that was a government program that allowed companies to borrow money from the government for their payrolls, so they could pay their entire payroll during the pandemic, and it saved a lot of people. And and most of the community banks dug in and helped a lot of smaller companies because Chase and Citibank were mainly handling their customers. And so a lot of them were struggling. There's a bank in New Jersey called Cross River, a company worth taking a look at. Cross River Bank, they're right in Englewood, New Jersey. They figured out how to do 100,000 paycheck protection loans. And you know how they did it? They applied artificial intelligence to the process. Plus, they figured it out faster than most, but they figured out how to do it. Most banks that I talked to were doing 1,000, were doing 2,000. They did 105,000, New York Times documented it. And it was all by artificial intelligence. Again, one of the techniques in management, operations management, that's being used, and it's going to be part of your careers. So something to be aware. Any of you study or look at artificial intelligence? I mean, down to the point of applications and programs. But that's an example of the example. That I saw was that Salesforce went to a bank in Los Angeles, and they needed to do paycheck protection loans to help their customers, their commercial customers and small businesses. And they did the same drill I had done. They said, what are the 10 things you need to do? And they said Salesforce could do 8 of them. And you only have to do get the application in and send the completed, documentation to the customer. And Salesforce did everything else in between. Plus, they were probably doing it for 500 other banks. So they got the process down. And that's a good example of outsourcing that I saw. Some of the other things coming up, digital adoption, which you guys are all digital, but your parents may not be, and I'm certainly learning. And what we found in banking is overnight the banks had to learn how to take care of customers during the pandemic without being face to face. So they encouraged customers to go on mobile banking, online banking if they weren't already, and all sorts of ways to use online systems. And they call it digital adoption, it's a fancy term. But it was a key for banks to keep providing service to consumers and to businesses. So again, if you're in a bank, I talked to one bank that had to go out and buy 200 laptops because all their employees in Long Island were going to work from home. And then you have to check security on the systems. How you doing? And then we have this thing out there called cyber. Have you guys looked at all at problems with cybersecurity? I do some work with the military in my media things. I do a lot of work at West Point, and we've been studying. We had the chance to sit on some of the cyber defense exercises with the NSA. And one thing I can say is our U.S. military is really good at cyber, and that's one of the key. I think we're seeing it. We're not. That's why I think some bad things haven't happened, because the U.S. government and military knows how to do cyber defense. And so there'll be more stories coming out of that. But if you're in a bank or any kind of business, one of the things you're worrying about is cyber protection. So being an expert in that is going to be an opportunity, because the problem isn't going to go away. In banking, we always say, they talk about fraudsters. The bank is trying to keep up with the problems, and they have all sorts of systems and to identify fraud. But there's always somebody comes up with a new way of committing fraud. And cyber is one of those concerns now. Data analytics is key. What's been happening is the internet 5 years ago was said to generate 5 billion pieces of information a day. And it's probably 5 times that now. And so there were a lot of companies that were being started, a lot of startups were trying to say, let's gather today's information, the 5 billion pieces of information, the 2 million that applies to us, and then, categorizing it and trying to put it in perspective and measuring things. So that's been a big part of data analytics, and now everybody's just trying to look at things at a more detailed level to make decisions and to get head starts on issues and helping customers. So that can be a big part of it, of what you may want to look at. The other thing is, how many of you are familiar with cloud computing? Okay. That's been a big thing in banking, because banks always want to have a fence around their data. They want to know what building their data is being housed in. And that doesn't work anymore, because there's too much data, it's coming from too many directions. I just heard a webinar from an executive at Chase say, we have to get comfortable with cloud. And the other reason is, what's the other reason cloud is important? Anybody? You can put the software in the cloud, and then anybody can access it, right? So you want to, so that's one thing. Some things you don't want to have in one installation. You may need, you're a place like Chase, you've got 10 major operating centers around the country. You want them all working the same system. So one of the ways of putting them all on the same platform is doing it through a cloud. But you got to convince management that you're taking care of the data. And that's an ongoing battle, because managing data security is really everybody's top concern. I'll mention something, I don't know anything about it, but you guys want to know something about it. You guys know anything about blockchain? No? You want to learn what blockchain is? You do? Okay. I mean, it just gets tossed out. Basically, blockchain is a way of providing data security, in a sentence. And banks and others are looking at blockchain as a way to provide a much higher level of security. And so if you read the newspapers, there's a lot of talk about it. I couldn't tell you a program that does it. It ties into Bitcoin and all that too, which I won't even get into. But I talked about cyber. And the other element that's a big topic is privacy. And how to keep, one thing we always have a saying, you don't want to do everything that you can do. There may be a lot of things that we could do because we have information about a customer. There used to be an era where people would, banks or others would, or marketing programs would say, well, we know you just went to the Yankee game on the weekend, and you want to buy a Yankee jacket. Now, people would say that's incorrect. You shouldn't be saying, well, we know you went to the game on Saturday. You should say, well, we understand you're a Yankee fan, and then sell the item. So that would be kind of an example of privacy. The Europeans have a very tight privacy law, which privacy law tends to go from Europe to California. California enacts something, and then a few other states follow. And because California is 40 million consumers, a lot of companies do what California requires because they don't want to have separate systems. One of the issues now is in privacy is everybody, MasterCard says this all the time right here. They don't want 50 different systems, one for each state where a customer may be. They'd really like to get to a national standard because if the federal government enacts a privacy standard, it eliminates the state law. They call it preemption. If you spend any time in privacy, federal government versus state law, you learn the word preemption, which means a law from the federal government preempts state law. And there's a lot of back and forth on that one, and you may see some more on that. Any question offhand? Those are kind of some of the things I deal with, we see in banking, but those are kind of some of the things that are hot buttons for banking industry. I'll tell you one other case. Anybody think of working in healthcare? Maybe, okay. I do a lot of work with veterans. I do reporting on veterans for 15 years now almost. And one of the big issues has been how veterans are applied to the Department of Veterans Affairs for healthcare, because they're not automatically eligible, you have to qualify. So veterans, they leave the Army or the Navy, and they would get their information on paper or on a floppy disk, and have to take it to a VA office and apply it and get sent up in the system, and hopefully they got it taken care of. And some of them needed, immediate care, not some of the things they couldn't wait around for. So there's been a project called an electronic health record that's been going on since the beginning of the Obama administration. Because he said, yeah, absolutely, we got to do it. And it'll be a health record for a veteran from the day they join the military to literally the day that they require cemetery service, 100 years, however many years later, and all of the steps in between. Because the Department of Defense and the VA are on different systems. We're on different systems, and even in the DoD, the Army had a system, the Navy had a system. Try and get those two organizations to talk to each other. There's so much rivalry. It's not just football. I mean, there's a lot of inter-service rivalry. Much less the Air Force. And all the subgroups, a lot of subgroups in the military and employee groups. So there's a project to consolidate. Remember I talked about bank consolidation? Consolidate all these healthcare record systems onto one system that could immediately be accessed when someone left the military, retired, immediately accessed by the Department of Veterans Affairs. And a contract was won by a company called Sisner. Look them up. $20 billion, that contract. It was supposed to be a $1 billion project when President Obama said, yeah, great idea, let's do it. It's finally being implemented now, and it's $20 billion. And I thought, it's the same thing banks have had to do in, consolidating files in banking. They're consolidating the Army file with the Navy file and getting it into the system the VA can register. And it's all to help veterans be cared for faster and more appropriately. And so hopefully it's going to go in. But again, healthcare is another area that this kind of technology processing, Sisner is a processing company, is working. You go to any of the health providers here in Westchester or the city, and they're on one of these healthcare processing networks. And they're all consolidated. You start hearing the same names of companies that system are on. Why? Because whoever's got the best system wins. And that's been, that's one of the things that's been out there since the internet. In terms of jobs, I started with a family-owned company in Westchester, and it turned out to be a great learning experience. And I worked for somebody who was a great mentor, and very benevolent. I was friends with him till the day he died. And but then from there, I got some experience. And I went to trade associations. I got sent around the country. And I got a job at American Express. Boy, was American Express a hard place to work. I think I was there a week, and I said, why did I do this? Because I was doing one specific task in that big company. It was our job to get these mailing lists out for the merchandise sales division. And it was all part of a big machine that was working, and you had to try to get the programmers and the systems analysts to explain to you how to get things done. And but it was all part of a company managing 15 million customers, and really state of the art. And there were a lot of really smart people there. Some of them I'm still friends with today. And so that's one of the things to look at. The other thing, so I would say there's a question in jobs is you want to work for a big brand at some point early in your career. I mean, I just said, I worked at American Express, Steam, Witter, and Chase, 3 really good brands. So I still say that today. I still go to the Chase alumni events. I was only there 3 years, but I'm still involved and friends with the people there. So that always helps, is to work for a brand. And it may take a while, but you want to work for one of the industry leaders. Now, I said you may find a vendor to work for, a processing company, or somebody who does some service, and the opportunity is to learn. But you may not want to stay there more than 2 years. From following the military doesn't let people stay in a job more than 2 to 3 years. They're constantly moving to get different experiences to see if, they could manage in one situation, could they manage it in another situation? And that's just, and there's a reason for that in getting more exposure. The other thing now is, how are we doing on time, by the way? We okay?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Is startups. Now, you could work for a startup right now, and I'd kind of recommend it. You hear about all these startups that started in college dormitories and in people's garages. And that's good. I mean, the question is, if you find something that's purposeful and has a chance, all those experiences, setting up social media for a charity can be very helpful. And again, you learn, you get more experience with software packages, and you learn how to do ads, learning how to do, I think Facebook is great for small business. And I just can't, during the pandemic, we talked to small businesses about how to promote themselves. I said, just take a photo of your clothing line, or your, the items, I work with a bakery up in White Plains, we took pictures of bakery items. Just put it out on Facebook and say, we're open, Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. till 5, whatever it is, come on in and see us. And I think that part of it is helpful. The other thing I would say is, in small business, the individuals are the brand. And a lot of times, my wife and I, and a lot of people, we'd go back and patronize a store, restaurant, whatever it is, because we knew somebody there. And we were, they had served us well, and we were friends with them. So we'd make sure we went back because of the individual, more so than, whatever it's been, Marinick Bakery. It's because it's Lee and the staff, the people work the counters, they were good folks, and we wanted to support them through a tough time. So, and a lot of people have trouble with that idea, and are just hoping to go back to the way things were. But it's not going to go back. Whoever learned to communicate during the pandemic, social media, whatever it is way out ahead now, because they're going to keep doing that. So that's sort of a thought on that. And then, how many of you have any familiarity with the term fintech? No? You want to learn what fintechs are. Fintechs are basically a lot of internet technology companies that are coming up with capabilities for banks. And it's also for brokerage companies. But that's where there's a huge amount of growth right now. The term didn't exist 7 or 8 years ago. But now I've been on 3 conferences this month on fintechs. And there's a whole bunch of ones, look, you can go online and find them. And most of them are free, so you could sit in and hear what are the discussion points. But, what did Jamie Dimon at Chase say earlier this year? He said, if we find a fintech we like, we buy it. And if you're working for that fintech, that's great because you probably made a lot of money. Because again, they don't have the time and energy to develop all the capabilities that customers expect. And what's happening also is the smaller banks, what we call community banks, could be a credit union, savings and loan. They are using fintech to try to stay capable, keep up with the Chase and Citi banks. Because it's really tough, especially on consumer, because everybody expects Chase and Citibank and Wells Fargo level service, even if they're a Tioga State Bank in Ithaca. We have a friend who works there. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, have you encountered the idea of Amazon expectation? What do you think that means?
Well, just really good customer service and fast shipping, just the best of the best.
And now Amazon has set the standard, exactly right. So every business now has customers coming in the door and saying, oh, why can't you ship it to me overnight? And if they don't have the capability, they don't want to spend the money. I had to order something for my media that was customized, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna get this overnight. They said, nah, it takes us a couple of, we gotta make it, we gotta get it out to you. It's gonna be a couple of days. So it's different. So it's hard for small businesses to keep up with the delivery at Amazon. If you get a job at Amazon, it sounds like a tough place to work, but you'll learn a tremendous amount. They're hiring a lot of people in New York City. There's sort of Google's got a place on the west side, been in their headquarters, and Amazon and others are coming, building tech centers in New York. And I encourage you to check, and if you ever get an opportunity, go for it. Again, remember I said work for a major brand. You work for Amazon for a couple of years, everyone's going to be impressed. You work for Google for a couple of years, you're golden because of the success and the reputation those companies have. The other thing is, I'd say is keep improving your education because the world is changing so fast. I mean, it's a real challenge for me to try and keep up with the technology. I was talking to Professor Eric Hammerman, I think. He's going to do a webinar with me next month. And he told me, the difference of strategy and fundamentals versus tools. And, I try to keep up with all the tools. I mentioned some of the things we're seeing industry is using, but gosh, it's complicated. And you have to make a contract with a company. Can they do what they say? How's it going to work? And then is there data security? But I'd suggest, if you get into any of those big brands that are processing companies, obviously if you get a job at Google or Amazon or one of those, that'll really be a big start for your career. But a lot of those places are really tough to work at. Facebook, we visited them, their office in New York, and they were talking about all the amenities that they were providing their employees. And then they started having problems. And all of a sudden, they're checking their systems all over the world on a minute-by-minute basis because of all the problems you've read about in the newspaper. So it's challenging, but it's a world that your career isn't going to be in. Europeans just came out with a law they want to limit the impact of the American internet companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and so they just came out with a law that the U.S. industries are kind of looking at, analyzing to see what impact it's going to be. The other idea that, a couple of things, I would say I would encourage you to travel. When you get out of school and you have a job and you can take a week's vacation, you haven't been to Europe, try to get to London or Paris or areas. Or I always want to still get to Korea. My dad served in the Army in Korea in 1957, actually, after the war. And what they did to rebuild that country, and Japan, Hong Kong, we don't know what it's going to be like because it's taken over by the Chinese. Obviously, the Chinese are a huge factor. Funny story, I listened to the dean at West Point give a talk, and she said that she got a chance to visit the Chinese Military Academy, the equivalent of West Point in China. And so she did, and it was impressive. And she said she noticed when they were walking around the campus, there was a drone flying in the air following them. A drone. This is following a one-star general. And but I would encourage you to travel, get some overseas experiences, because someday your company is going to say, hey, we need to do a project in Brazil, we're going to do a project in Germany or in wherever. And if you've been there, it's a whole lot different than if you've never been there. So, sometimes before you get married, before you have mortgages, sometimes you're a little freer to travel and get those first-hand experiences. The other thing is developing mentors. And I think we all said we didn't do enough of it, but it means staying in touch with your professor and your classmates and the companies they go to. Find out what working at their company is like, if it's a positive or what are the pluses and minuses. And you may get that from doing part-time jobs. Do you have a part-time? It sounds like you're working somewhere.
Who, me?
Yeah. No?
Currently, no. I'm
No,
actually
okay.
not right now.
But you may have a part-time job at a company and say, what is it like? But stay in touch with people and, trade associations, there are different groups. Now, are you mostly management maker? What kind of majors are you in? Are you in marketing or marketing? Mostly marketing? Okay. There's a big crossover today, I would say, between marketing and data analytics, and also kind of data management. Just, to be able to do anything in marketing today, you got to be able to run the systems and know how the systems work, to know what the potential is and what the pitfalls are. So, a lot of people, now you get people in engineering taking marketing oriented or MBAs, because they know how the big system works, but they got to learn how to communicate, how to do marketing. What are the fundamentals of marketing? Because they already know the tools, but you got to know both. So that's kind of a cross area, but staying in touch with people, meeting people at trade associations. One thing I tell people is, what's the purpose of this? Primary purpose.
Just in contact with you.
Think phone calls. I still try to call. I used to say, if I go back and forth with somebody on email 3 times, I can pick up the phone and call them. Yesterday, somebody sent me an email or text at 8 a.m. about he was my interview guest on radio yesterday. So I called him up because I knew he was, looking at his phone. So I called him up, and we got more done in 3 minutes on the phone than we would have done interacting back and forth. And the other thing about phone verbal communications is you can tell if somebody's upset. Like if I ever have a problem, I call the person because I want to. If I got to say, at one time at West Point, I set up a meeting that didn't work out, and they sent me a note saying, "Ken, you shouldn't have set that meeting up." So I called them back because I wanted to find out how big a problem it was, or how upset, whether it was just a little thing or more than that. And you can find out so much more from a phone call than you can from going back and forth on text or email. In fact, I've seen a lot of situations go bad when people have started emailing back and forth. People become much more terse on email than they will in a normal conversation where they're more likely to work things out. And the other thing I would just say is you want to become known as an expert in your craft. And whatever it is, maybe it's running Salesforce or being an expert in setting up websites. It helps to have that, and it can get you indoors by people saying he or she is really good at developing websites or developing marketing strategy or doing webinars. We do a lot of video setups, and being known as an expert in that. On a big scale, one of the first, started doing business interviews after I was doing interviews at West Point and with veterans. And I cover Army football, which has been a great opportunity. And the Army-Navy game is sponsored by USAA, which is a big Austin, Texas-based military-oriented insurance company with a reputation for great customer service. And so, I'm at the media day for the Army-Navy game, and I say, well, can I talk to the representative of USAA? And they say, sure. So I go up to him, we start the interview, and I said, this is Admiral John Byrd. And I said, sir, tell me, what'd you do in the Navy during your career? And he said, commanded a nuclear submarine. About that number of words. And I said, oh, wow. And what else did you do in the Navy? And he said, commanded the 7th Fleet. About those number of words. And now he left the Navy and as executive with USAA. Well, one of the things I'm seeing in the military is they want people who are experts in things. And right now, submarines is a big deal. They're about to build a whole new class of submarines called the Columbia class at $5 billion apiece. Another thought I had for you is consider the defense industry, which you see a lot of people here think Wall Street. Well, Iona's done really well with sending graduates to Wall Street, including people like Bob LaPenta did very well on Wall Street, and Iona's growing because of that. But there are other industries. Some people go into retail. A lot of people from Catholic schools have always gone into accounting because you can get a good job with an accounting degree, the next day. But I would take a look, the companies like Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman and Boeing, and just take a look, because if you're in operations research or management, there's so much going on. And their contracts are only getting bigger. I think the Biden administration just gave the DoD another $25 billion this week. So, Electric Boat up in Connecticut, they're the ones that are going to build most of those $5 billion, they're called Columbia-class submarines. And there's so much into that. So it's just another option you may not think of, but the defense industry is growing. And you need a lot of great people there. So is there any questions? I think I've way over my time a lot.
No, you have plenty of time. It's 2:51. The class ends at 3:18, so we have at least 25 minutes.
Okay.
But if the students have any questions, you'd feel free to ask.
What was your undergrad degree?
My undergraduate degree was in marketing.
And postgrad?
Was in data management here.
A graduate? Doctorate or master's?
No, I was thinking about getting a doctorate. I would have done something in leadership, but I got talked out of it, unfortunately, about 15 years ago. I was thinking about doing it and didn't go that way. The other thing I would say, sort of in that question area, is people today have multiple master's degrees, which I didn't realize is more common than you might think. And today people might have a master's in engineering and they might have an MBA, or they might have a master's in marketing. They may want something in data analytics or data management. And those are the people that move into leadership positions. I know when I got to Chase and I had a master's degree completed, I was at the AVP level. I was a step up from people who didn't have a master's degree. And then you look at the people, I've always found every time I've taken more courses, something good has happened. Either I've gotten a new job or I've met somebody that's been very valuable. I'm still in touch with an NYU professor I took a course at, when we had to learn about the internet when it was starting up 20 years ago. And this fella had a design for a company. He had the whole blueprint for Amazon. And he had it down to a science. All the things you do to do a online merchandising, multiple department company. But he just never, got the financing, I guess, to get it started. But I'm still friends today, and you want people like that who, when you have a job decision, you got to make a go, no-go decision. Leave one job, go to another job, that you can talk to them about it. I felt I helped my nephew was graduated from Arizona State, and really did very well there. He had a defense clearance when he was still an undergraduate, working in one of their labs that was doing military work. And he had a chance. He called me up and said, I got a choice of going to ExxonMobil or Deloitte, an accounting, consulting, data management company. And I listened to the job descriptions. I said, if you go into Exxon, you can learn one business. If you go to Deloitte, they're working with lots and lots of different businesses. So he chose Deloitte. He's still there 10 years later. And he's installing software for governments. He installed software for California, and he was in Germany installing software. And I'm sure he talked to a bunch of people, but you want to have people like the professor here to call and say, I got a job offer. Is this a good one or a bad one? I said, every job I moved for, it's a whole lot different once you arrive, than maybe what you thought about it. You look from the outside. So sometimes you need advice. Sometimes you got to take the advice, stick it out for a year or two. Because you learn a lot at that company, and it's a good brand to have on your resume. You're always going to look at it.
One of the advantages of working for a big company is that you have the opportunity to move from one section of the company to the other, which is completely different from what you used to do, and still be in the same organization. I remember when I was at AT&T, I was there for 15 years. There's the development group, there's the design group, there are the testers, there are the network people, and then there's also management. So if you're not happy with the design group, you can, migrate to the development group. You're not happy with that, you can go to the marketing group. So there's the opportunity to go from one section to the other and still be within the same organization without the fear of losing your job. But the thing is, it's not easy to get into those organizations, so you have to start from scratch somewhere and move up.
Well, as I said, we're talking about you may get into a company because you can manage a tool for the company or a specific thing. I found it challenging sometimes. Like at Chase, the place you wanted to be in was credit card acquisition, because that's where all the science was being applied to. Which of the 200 million Americans, or whatever the number is, that we're going to net it down to mailing out to 100,000. And we know, there's a tremendous amount of what they call data modeling that goes into that decisions. So they're kind of the highest paid people, and they're most scrutinized, but they're basically running the strategy that brings in the money for the company. So it's really the place to go. But you got to know what those software programs are that they're using. So I encourage you, when you get to a company, you have lunch with as many people as you can, and you meet people in other departments and learn what's going on. Sometimes you have a project that interacts with another department, and it's a chance to learn about that department. Like in marketing, we always were required, we did as good practice, to go to the customer service facility, which for Chase was in Wilmington, Delaware, and explain to the managers there exactly what the program was going to do. And then listen to some of the customer service reps taking calls, and hear what they're saying, hear what their problems were, what they would want changed. So that's the thing. But yeah, it's moving around in companies is a science, I think, in networking. Chase used to have a management training program, and they would bring in people from a lot of companies. The chairman of Chase at the time, Tom LeBrecq, had gone to Villanova, so they brought a lot of Villanova people in, and the vice chairman, Art Ryan, went to Providence, so there were a lot of Providence people in that management training program. So they come in, they get start, 1st August, and they'd have a month of training in classrooms all together, so they all knew each other. Then they got sent out to all different kind of jobs in the bank, but they all talked on the phone every day. The network was there. And then those people, were being watched to see if they had the potential for fast promotion. If you're not in the training program, it's a little more difficult. If you just get in it, you get hired as a one-up kind of build one job. You got to work harder in a company like that to move ahead. But again, you do a good job of what you're doing, and you meet other people, you learn what's going on around you, you know, how your project interacts with other people and other departments, and then maybe that other department said, hey, there's that really good person there. You know, maybe we can bring them into to an opening that we have. And, you know, so I'm trying to think, anything else you've had to listen to me talk a lot, but I hope it's been positive. I've just had this great experience to work with Coach Patino this year. I was in about 10 post games with him and watched somebody who knows basketball as well as anybody and is absolutely an expert. And then, you know, and that applies to people who could be CEOs of businesses. And then you watch how he interacts with players and with staff and with the school, and interacts with the media. You know, we had a lot of national reporters calling up asking him, well, are you going to stay at Iona? He kept saying, yeah, he loves it here. And but, you know, he's an interesting guy just to watch, you know, while he's here, see him at games, but also watch what he says in the articles. And maybe you bump into him, he's very gracious. And, but it's interesting when you have somebody who is considered one of the top 5 at what he does in the entire country, top 5, you know, and have him at your school and while you're here, and just watch the way he handles things. So I think it's been neat to talk with him, and boy, is he sharp and on top of everything. And very, you know, I said very gracious, it says the right things, and very complimentary to St. Peter's. I mean, he was really disappointed. I was at the post game after they lost to the MAC, to Ryder, a team they'd beaten twice during the season. And he just was totally frustrated, you know, with that. Then they played really well at Florida. You know, they lost to a good team in the last minute, but they played very well at Florida in the NIT. You know, I would say look for any trade associations. You know, we're going to be doing a webinar with Professor Eric Hammerman.
Hammerman, yeah.
Yeah, the 20th of April, we're going to do a talk with 3 schools, and we're going to set it up so people can listen in about what's being talked about. But anything else? I would, go ahead.
I just have a question. You mentioned when you were talking about Salesforce before,
Yeah.
about another tool that was like up and coming. I was wondering what that's called
Hubspot.
again. What is it?
Hubspot.
Hubspot. Okay.
I would take a look at it as far as what capabilities it provides. And in fact, I had to do that. I did a talk with a person who runs a digital agency last week, and she was, you know, considered a Hubspot either partner or licensee, and had been through all the training and knew how to apply it to lots of different situations. So that's a good one to look at. But I would look again at, you know, like credit card marketing has changed. Banking, you know, it used to be we were sending out hundreds of millions of credit card invitations, you know, letters saying we're offering you a pre-approved offer of a credit card account. And it's about 10 years ago. And you could get, you know, at the same time, the catalog industry was sending out, you know, stacks of catalogs. Don't do that anymore. Everything's online. But there's still differences in the dynamics of that. You know, try to get somebody to go online. There are things called, like, you ever seen NerdWallet? Or another good website to look at is called the Points Guy, which is a travel website and Facebook page. And they talk about how people can use loyalty points to, you know, to travel to more places, you know, as many places as they can off their activity. They also do awards for the best hotels, best airlines, best first-class service. Points Guy is an interesting website to take a look at. So, you know, but it's different today in terms of how to acquire a customer. You know, create demand versus it was 15 years ago when a lot of it was done through the mail. and everything's online, but the dynamics are different online. You know, the websites like LL Bean looks pretty much like other companies. You know, doing email strategy. You know, there are companies that send me an email every single day. And, you know, I wish I wish there was a way you can tone it down to once a week. Because my email gets swamped. But they realize that it doesn't cost that much to send, and you may be interested in an item that particular day. Although one thing I'd say to a company, and that may be something you want to look at, is what does it take to get a customer to pull the trigger and buy that item they've been looking at? Like there's a golf club I've been looking at online every day all winter. And I'm just waiting, you know, for the day they put a $25 off on it. And then I'll pull the trigger and buy it. You know, but they never do. And so they keep sending me the same, you know, there's this whole, you understand the idea of following? You know, you click on a pair of tennis shoes, you know, because you're maybe interested. The next week, every time you turn on your computer, you're going to see an ad for those tennis shoes, right? For that brand?
Yeah.
And that's called following. And it's one thing I forgot to talk about. Are you familiar with the term programmatic advertising? Again, something to be familiar at. Programmatic is basically placing ads on Google and Facebook, and now Twitter and other online. And there are companies in New York that every ad that goes through on Google goes through. And they say, well, we make 1 penny every time an ad goes through. And we have 10 million ads that go through here in a week. And that is another area in marketing you want to know who are the companies that do programmatic advertising. It's changing, but it's basically how companies feed ads onto Facebook in particular and other sites. And then the whole thing of Google ad placement is something to study and be familiar, because you may be in a company, or you could be even in a small company, is you may be asked, well, we need to have an ad on Google. How do we do it? And then you go to a bigger company where there's a bigger budget and say, okay, given a bigger budget, how do we expand our presence on Google? How do we make sure that when somebody types our name or types our category, that our company shows up in the first page? And that is just critical marketing today, right? So that's the thing, again, to keep an eye on. I'm just hopefully telling you a few terms that while you're undergraduates here, you have a chance. Again, read the business section of the papers. Read a few business texts. Read the books, things that are coming out on Uber, and what Uber went through, and others. And see what they're talking about so that you can study up on those things. You want to know what things like blockchain is. Programmatic advertising is big. I hate to say it, but the term, anybody handle quantum computing? That's coming up. It basically allows companies to manage much bigger sets of data faster and find the data, the information they're looking for. And that's what you're starting to hear companies talk about. Because I'll tell you where it applies to. It applies to Wall Street. There's so many brokers trying to figure out, okay, how do we pick the best stock to buy? And how do we do it faster than everybody else does? Things like quantum computing apply. And again, on banking, on making lending decisions, is still a big challenge. One of the other things that, if you ever get a chance to, don't turn it down, is if you get to a bank like Chase, Citi, Wells, Cap One, and you get a chance to go in their credit training department, that's golden. In traditional banking, that was just the person who ended up, you get through credit training at Chase Manhattan Bank, and you're going to have a job for the rest of your life, in interesting places, doing interesting work. So there are, that's like one of the things, and you're in New York, there's a lot of banks headquartered in the area, and that's like one of those things, you get a chance to do credit training at a major bank, you don't turn it down. That just sets your career. And remember I said, you get a national training program, the organization looks to see how you do that. Credit training is a big deal there. So anyway, that's probably enough. I appreciate the chance to talk and hopefully offer some advice. I think some things to look at as you got it, another year here at Iona mostly?
Yeah.
Is follow the newspapers, read the books, see what, I still get the paper copy of the New York Times every day. And, they're talking about a lot of new technology. And understanding and being able to manage technology can get you indoors. So anyway, it's been a pleasure. And, do well in the rest of your semester.
Yeah, I might as well add one more thing, and that is that what I teach in this course is operations management. And a lot of what I talk about are techniques for doing certain things, forecasting, inventory systems, all kinds of things. What I want you to think about is that the techniques that I'm teaching you are not etched in stone. They could be improved upon. And it is your responsibility to do that. In other words, critically look at the techniques that we're using even in operations management, so that later on in life, when you run into something similar, you can even develop more sophisticated tools for doing exactly the same thing. The textbooks that will appear 5-10 years from now are probably textbooks that will contain things that you have developed that are improvement on what I am teaching you. That will be old hat. At Lucent Technologies, where I worked for a few years, if you go in as a fresh graduate, you are considered a member of technical staff, MTS. And if you come up with a new technique for doing anything, you get recognized as a DMTS, which is a distinguished member of technical staff. So there are so many categories that you can fall into. So my message to you is, don't take everything I tell you hook, line, and sinker. Well, you should believe it up to a point, but think about ways that you can improve on it so that you can come up with better solutions. Okay. Well,
A pleasure, and I just say, the other thing to look at is be on LinkedIn. How many of you got a LinkedIn account? Most of you? Yeah, and great place to look up companies, publish things once in a while. See an article that's interesting. I always say, if I read an article top to bottom, I probably want to publish it because there's going to be other people interested in that article. Anyway, and feel free to contact me. I'm on LinkedIn, Ken Kraetzer. I can give you a card if you'd like. But great to see you. We all wish we were college students again. Take care.